The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and bad decisions. That is what I remember most about the moment Nolan Brooks looked me dead in the eye and said, "Effective immediately. We are terminating your position as Vice President of Engineering." I am David Vance, 54 years old, and I had just been fired in a room full of people who could not spell firmware if you spotted them the first 6 letters. Nobody moved. 14 executives sitting around a mahogany table, and you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Nolan did not blink. He just sat there in his tailored suit with his hands folded like he was closing a real estate deal instead of ending someone's career. To him, I was not the guy who had spent 11 years building Apex Defense Systems' autonomous drone navigation platform from the ground up. I was a line item he could cut to make his quarterly numbers look pretty for the board. I felt my jaw tighten. My hands wanted to grip the armrests, flip the table, tell him exactly what I thought of his leadership, but I did not. I stood up, straightened my tie, looked at every single face in that room, and said one word: appreciated. A few people shifted. Someone coughed. They probably thought I had lost my mind. But none of them had any idea what that word actually meant. See, Nolan Brooks was 38, a Wharton MBA. His uncle Robert Brooks sat on Apex's board of directors and ran Pinnacle Capital, the private equity firm that had led our Series B funding back in 2019. Nolan had never designed a circuit board, never debugged a navigation algorithm, but he sure loved words like operational efficiency and margin optimization. Me? I had been in aerospace and defense engineering for 27 years, started at Raytheon in 1997 as a junior systems engineer. Spent 6 years there, learning how satellite communication systems actually work. Then I moved to Northrop Grumman during the early drone boom, was part of the team that developed some of the first autonomous flight control systems for military unmanned aerial vehicles. Watched 3 companies around me fold during defense budget cuts in 2013. That is when I learned the most important lesson of my career. If you build something valuable, make sure you own the keys. When I joined Apex Defense Systems in 2013, they were a scrappy startup with 12 engineers and a dream of building autonomous drones for commercial infrastructure inspection. I built their entire navigation platform from scratch. The Pathguard system, proprietary algorithms that could fly a drone through a forest of power lines in zero visibility, mapping everything in real time with millimeter precision. By 2020, we had contracts with 17 utility companies across North America. By 2023, we were managing autonomous inspections for 60% of the major pipeline operators in the Gulf Coast region. But here is what Nolan never understood. 3 years ago, when Apex was hemorrhaging cash during a funding drought, I had done something smart. I had restructured the core Pathguard patents into a separate entity, Vance Autonomous Technologies, my company, completely legal, fully documented, approved unanimously by the same board that had just watched Nolan hand me a termination letter. The licensing agreement was structured so Apex could use the technology indefinitely as long as the original architect maintained an active role in the company. If that relationship was severed without a proper 12-month transition protocol, all licensing reverted to my entity within 72 hours. My attorney had buried that clause in Section 9.4.3 of the Intellectual Property Licensing Framework. Every board member had signed it. The Pathguard system was not just software. We are talking about 11 years of navigation algorithms, collision avoidance systems, and machine learning models trained on over 2 million hours of autonomous flight data. When I started building it, commercial drone technology was basically remote-controlled toys. I designed Pathguard to be modular, interchangeable sensor packages, adaptive flight controllers, cloud-based mission planning that could coordinate hundreds of drones simultaneously. By the time Nolan showed up, Pathguard was generating 80% of Apex's revenue. We had contracts worth over $400 million annually. Nolan had joined the board 14 months before my termination. Uncle Robert's firm had led a recapitalization round, and suddenly Nolan was appointed Chief Operating Officer with a mandate to streamline operations. Translation: cut costs, boost margins, make the numbers look good. He had never managed engineers before. 6 months in, Nolan started cutting my engineering budget, canceled our advanced sensor research and development program, laid off 8 experienced drone engineers, told the board that engineering was overstaffed relative to revenue generation. I argued, got shut down, got labeled resistant to organizational change. After that conference room execution, I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Engine off, windows down, October air cooling my face. My phone started vibrating like a slot machine paying out. Julian Hayes, my lead navigation engineer, texted first. "Boss, what the hell? Security just locked your office. Are they serious?" Julian was 31, Caltech PhD in robotics, best autonomous systems engineer I had ever known. Then came Sarah Jenkins from operations. "David, this is madness. Half the team is in shock. Nobody knows what is happening with the Chevron deployment next week." Sarah had been our director of operations for 6 years. She understood better than anyone how critical our technology was to the companies depending on it. My older brother Thomas called from his ranch in Wyoming. "David, what happened?" "I just got a call from your wife." Thomas was 58, retired Army colonel, now running a small defense consulting firm. The thing that ate at me was not losing my job. It was the texts from my team. These were brilliant engineers, people who had trusted me, followed my lead, built something extraordinary together, and now they were scared. Julian was not just an employee to me. Watching him panic felt like watching my own son get blindsided by something he did not deserve. I drove home to my wife Elena. We had been married 26 years. She handed me a bourbon and said what she always says. "They just handed you the best opportunity you have had in years, David. They are just too stupid to know it yet." She was right. But even she did not know how right until 3 days later. Nolan had scheduled a critical demonstration for Thursday. 3 days after my termination, the Department of Energy had a $200 million contract on the table for autonomous pipeline inspection across the entire Gulf Coast region. Representatives from the Department of Energy, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and 3 different defense contractors were flying in to watch Pathguard perform a live autonomous inspection of a simulated pipeline corridor at our testing facility in Galveston. I was not there, obviously, but Julian texted me real-time updates from the control room. 9:08 in the morning. Demo starting. Nolan is wearing his power suit. Department of Energy people look serious. 9:23. First drone launched following pre-programmed route. Looking good so far. 9:31. Something is wrong. Navigation system just froze mid-flight. Drone went into emergency hover mode. 9:38. Second drone will not even initialize. Control interface showing license authorization required. Contact Vance Autonomous Technologies. Nolan just went pale. 9:45. Department of Energy representative asking if Apex actually owns the technology they are demonstrating. Nolan is stammering. This is brutal. I sat in my home office reading these texts. The system was doing exactly what I had designed it to do, protecting itself. When I had restructured those patents 3 years earlier, I had built in multiple fail-safes. The core licensing framework required periodic cryptographic authorization from the patent holder. That is Vance Autonomous Technologies. If the lead architect's employment was terminated without executing the transition protocol outlined in Section 9.4.3, all licensing tokens would expire within 72 hours, and the system would enter protected mode. No override, no workaround. The encryption was military grade. 10:15, complete disaster. All 4 demo drones grounded, Chevron team already leaving. Department of Energy representative said something about due diligence concerns and walked out. 10:42, Nolan locked himself in his office, legal team in emergency session. Someone from ExxonMobil just asked our sales rep if we have been misrepresenting our technology capabilities. Oh my God. The demo failure was just the opening act. What Nolan had not considered was that Pathguard was not sitting idle on servers somewhere. At that exact moment, it was actively managing autonomous drone operations for 23 companies across the country. Duke Energy's high-voltage transmission line inspections in the Carolinas, TransCanada's pipeline monitoring across Alberta, the Army Corps of Engineers levee inspection program along the Mississippi, 3 offshore oil platform inspection contracts in the Gulf of Mexico. When the licensing expired, those systems did not crash. They did something worse. They grounded every drone and locked every operator console. Suddenly, field crews who had been relying on autonomous inspections were staring at blank screens and calling headquarters asking what happened. Julian's next text came at noon. Duke Energy just called. Their entire fall inspection schedule is frozen. They have got crews sitting in trucks across 3 states with no operational drones. They are threatening breach of contract. By 2 o'clock, it was a full-blown crisis. Apex support lines were overwhelmed. TransCanada had escalated to their chief executive officer. The Army Corps of Engineers was talking about national infrastructure security concerns. Nolan had brought in 2 outside law firms, and they were all telling him the same thing. The intellectual property agreements were airtight. Sarah called me that afternoon. Her voice was tight. "David, this is chaos. Nolan is blaming the engineering team for system failures. He put Julian and 2 other engineers on administrative leave pending investigation. He is telling clients it is a cybersecurity incident." A cybersecurity incident. That made my blood boil. He was covering his incompetence by accusing my people of sabotage. "How is Julian handling it?" I asked. "He is devastated. He keeps telling everyone he cannot fix anything without authorization codes that only exist in your licensing infrastructure." Nolan will not listen. He keeps insisting Apex owns everything, and you are somehow illegally blocking their systems. "Sarah, I need a favor," I said. "Get me a complete list of all active client deployments. Every company, every drone fleet, every active contract. I need to know exactly who is being affected and how badly." She hesitated. "David, I cannot just share internal documents." "You are not sharing it with a competitor. You are giving it to the patent holder who is trying to figure out how to minimize damage to innocent people." Duke Energy line workers did not do anything wrong. TransCanada pipeline crews do not deserve to sit idle because Nolan Brooks does not understand technology licensing. Silence. "Then, I will have it to you within 2 hours." The list hit harder than I expected. 23 companies. Combined, they were running over 600 autonomous drones through Pathguard's navigation system. Some of those operations were safety-critical high-voltage line inspections, where a single missed defect could cause a wildfire. Pipeline monitoring where a leak detection delay could mean an environmental disaster. This was not just about money anymore. People could actually get hurt. That evening, my doorbell rang. Elena answered and came back looking surprised. "David, there is a young man at the door. Says he is Julian from your old company." Julian Hayes stood on my porch looking like he had been through a war. Wrinkled polo shirt, coffee stain on his jeans, dark circles under his eyes like he had not slept in days. "Boss, we need to talk." I brought him into my study and poured him a bourbon. Kid needed it. "It is falling apart," he said without sitting down. "TransCanada is pulling their contract." Duke Energy's lawyers sent a formal breach notice, and Nolan sent a company-wide email calling the system failure a technical anomaly and saying external consultants are being engaged to resolve it. External consultants. He was talking about me like I was some IT help desk, instead of the person who built every line of code in that platform. "Julian, I designed those failsafes for a reason. Nolan thought he could fire the pilot and keep the plane flying, but it is not just Nolan getting hurt. Our entire team is being scapegoated." Julian took a shaky breath. He accused Michael Ortiz of leaving back doors in the navigation code. "Michael has been with us for 7 years. His wife just had a baby last month. He is terrified he is going to get fired and lose his health insurance." That hit me in the chest. Michael was one of my first hires at Apex. Quiet guy. Incredible attention to detail. His kid was 3 weeks old. "What is Nolan saying about restoring access?" I asked. "He is convinced Apex owns everything and you are breaking the law. 3 different law firms have explained why he is wrong, but he will not hear it." I did not sleep much that night. Kept thinking about Michael Ortiz and his newborn. About Julian, who had trusted me with his career. About the Duke Energy line workers sitting in trucks with no drones to fly. I had built those fail-safes to protect myself, but collateral damage was not part of my plan. The next morning my phone rang at 7. Human Resources. Brenda Wallace. "David, how are you? Listen, there has been some internal discussion about your situation. We think we may have moved a bit hastily on the leadership transition. Brenda, skip the script, I said. You are calling because your clients are threatening lawsuits and your drones are grounded across the country. Pause. Well, yes, there have been some operational complications, but we would love to explore a consulting arrangement, perhaps a 60-day engagement to help stabilize systems while we bring new technical leadership on board. How much? I asked. We are thinking 300,000 plus accelerated vesting on your remaining stock options. I smiled. 300,000 to fix a crisis that was costing clients millions per day. Not interested. Okay. What about 500,000? We understand the urgency. Brenda, you are not understanding the situation. Nolan Brooks fired me publicly in front of people I had worked alongside for 11 years. And now you want me to fix his disaster for consulting fees? The silence stretched long enough for me to hear her flipping through notes. What would it take? She finally asked. It would take Nolan Brooks publicly acknowledging that he made a mistake. It would take the board guaranteeing that every engineer on my team is protected from retaliation. It would take a formal apology to Julian Hayes, Michael Ortiz, and every other engineer Nolan accused of sabotage. And honestly, even then, I am not sure I would be interested. David, please be reasonable. Companies are losing millions. Then maybe Nolan should have been reasonable before he decided to play power games with technology he has never bothered to understand. I hung up. 4 days after that call, I got an email that changed the trajectory of everything. Not from Apex. From someone I had not spoken to in 6 years. Olivia Rossi at Sentinel Aerospace. David, heard through the grapevine what happened. If you are free for lunch, I think we should have a conversation. Olivia. Olivia had worked with me at Apex from 2014 to 2018. Brilliant aerospace engineer, Stanford PhD, MBA from MIT Sloan. She understood both the technology and the business better than anyone I had ever met. Nolan had pushed her out during one of his early reorganizations, claiming her department was redundant. Sentinel Aerospace was Apex's primary competitor in the autonomous drone inspection market. They had been trying to build something comparable to Pathguard for 5 years with moderate success. Their systems worked fine in open terrain, but they could not match our precision in complex environments. The gap was the predictive navigation engine, and they knew it. We met at a seafood restaurant in downtown Houston on Wednesday, exactly 10 days after Nolan had fired me. Olivia looked sharp, confident posture, direct eye contact. Nolan Brooks is the dumbest smart person I have ever met, she said before I had even opened my menu, but you built something at Apex that is genuinely world-class. Built, I corrected, past tense. She smiled and slid a tablet across the table. David, I will be direct. We have been monitoring the situation. System failures, client defections, investor panic. Apex's stock is down 38%. TransCanada terminated. Duke Energy threatening litigation. The Department of Energy contract is dead. On the screen was a detailed analysis of Apex's financial implosion. Client revenue projections cratering, employee attrition accelerating as engineers jumped ship. 3 pending lawsuits from clients claiming breach of service agreements. Impressive intelligence work, I said. We do our homework. But here is what really matters. We know you hold the Pathguard patents through Vance Autonomous Technologies. We know the licensing structure, and we know that technology is worth significantly more than what Apex's balance sheet ever reflected. I took a sip of water. That is Apex's problem, David. Sentinel wants to acquire your complete patent portfolio, not license it, full acquisition. We are talking about combining your navigation technology with our hardware platform and sensor arrays to build something neither company could create alone. She pulled up another screen. Side-by-side technical comparisons of Sentinel's drone systems and Pathguard's software capabilities. They had clearly done deep analysis. What kind of number are we discussing? I asked. $750 million for the full patent portfolio plus a 5-year position as our chief technology officer at $2.8 million annually. Full authority over technical direction, research and development budget, and hiring. You would be building the next generation of autonomous systems with the resources and respect you deserve. $750 million for patents that Nolan Brooks thought were just software on a server. This is a real offer? Board approved last Tuesday. We have been planning this approach since the day you were terminated. The system failures just accelerated our timeline by about 6 months. Olivia leaned forward. David, think about what you had at Apex. 11 years fighting for budget, justifying your innovations to people who thought autonomous navigation was just a fancy GPS. PS. At Sentinel, you would be working with engineers who understand the physics, executives who respect the science, and a board that knows the difference between cost-cutting and value destruction. What is the timeline? I asked. Due diligence, 2 weeks. Patent transfer and integration planning, another 2. You could be our chief technology officer by Thanksgiving with a team of your choosing and a lab that would make your old Apex facility look like a garage. I thought about Julian, Michael Ortiz, and his newborn daughter, Sarah, and the rest of the team stuck in Nolan's chaos. What about bringing my people over? Already anticipated, Olivia said. Julian Hayes is at the top of our wish list. Sarah Jenkins, we would love her running field operations. Michael Ortiz, absolutely. Anyone else you recommend? We are prepared to make competitive offers with signing bonuses to offset any non-compete concerns. This was not about revenge anymore. This was about building something better with people who deserve to work somewhere their talent was valued. I need a few days, I said. Of course, but David, do not wait too long. Apex is bleeding out, and other companies are going to start circling the patents. We want to be first and best, but we will not be the only ones calling. That night, Elena and I sat on the back porch with bourbon and the kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes. She had been watching me carry the weight of the past 2 weeks, the anger, the guilt about my team. What does your gut say? She asked. That Nolan Brooks tried to throw away the most valuable thing his company ever built, and now someone smarter gets to benefit from his arrogance. And the money? We had been comfortable on my Apex salary. But $750 million was a different universe. That was generational wealth. That was never worrying about healthcare, helping our kids buy homes, funding scholarships, living the rest of our lives on our terms. The money matters, but it is really about the work. Sentinel has the resources and the leadership to do this right. I would be building instead of defending for the first time in years. Then you already know the answer, Elena smiled. I called my attorney the next morning. Charles Montgomery had been my lawyer since my Northrop Grumman days. He had structured the patent agreements that were now the most important documents in my professional life. Charles, I need you to review an acquisition offer. $750 million for the full Vance Autonomous Technologies portfolio. Long whistle. That is a major transaction, David. Buyer? Sentinel Aerospace. Full acquisition plus chief technology officer position. We spent 4 hours dissecting every clause, patent valuations, technology transfer protocols, tax implications, employment terms, non-compete carve-outs. Charles's team had built the original structure of Vance Autonomous Technologies specifically to accommodate a scenario like this. Everything is clean, Charles said finally. The patents are unencumbered, clearly held by your entity, and Apex's licensing expired exactly as designed when your employment was terminated without following transition protocol. They have zero legal standing to block this sale. And the Chief Technology Officer agreement? Strong terms. You would have meaningful authority over technology, direction, and team building. I called Olivia that afternoon. Let's do it. Outstanding. I will get our legal team moving on due diligence immediately. One more thing, David. What is that? Welcome home. Friday evening, 12 days after my termination, my doorbell rang again. This time it was not Julian or Brenda from Human Resources. Nolan Brooks stood on my porch in khakis and a wrinkled Oxford shirt looking like he had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. David, can we talk? I almost closed the door, but some part of me, maybe the part that still remembered what it felt like to be young and in over your head, let him in. Elena brought us coffee and disappeared upstairs. You cannot do this, Nolan said, his voice hoarse. You cannot sell our technology to our biggest competitor. It is not your technology, Nolan. It never was. That is kind of the whole point. You developed it at Apex, with our funding, our facilities, our resources. I pulled out the folder I had been keeping on my desk for 2 weeks. Copies of every legal document Charles had structured 3 years earlier. Patent assignments, board resolutions, licensing agreements. All signed by Apex's executives, including his Uncle Robert. Read Section 9.4.3, I said. Your own board approved this arrangement during the budget restructuring in 2021. They just never explained it to you because nobody imagined you would be foolish enough to terminate the patent holder without following the transition protocol. Nolan's face went gray as he flipped through the pages. I watched the realization hit him in stages. Confusion, then denial, then something close to grief. This will destroy the company. 300 people, David, people with families. That landed harder than I intended. I thought about Michael Ortiz, his 3-week-old daughter, the engineers who had sent me panic texts, the field crews sitting in trucks across the country. Nolan, you want to help those people? Here is what you are going to do. You are going to offer anyone who wants to leave a full severance package, 18 months salary, continued benefits, job placement assistance. And you are going to give me a list of every engineer who wants to stay in autonomous systems. Sentinel is hiring aggressively, and I am building a team. You are gutting my company and calling it a rescue. No. You gutted your company the day you decided an MBA spreadsheet was more valuable than 27 years of engineering expertise. I am just picking up the pieces. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he set down the papers, stood up, and walked toward the door. For what it is worth, he said without turning around. The board told me you would go quietly. They did not know me very well. He left. I watched his sports car pull out of the driveway. Taillights disappearing down the street. The signing was the following Tuesday, 14 days exactly from the morning Nolan had fired me. Sentinel Aerospace's headquarters in Houston's energy corridor was everything Apex pretended to be. Glass and steel, sure, but with actual engineers visible through every window, actual prototypes in the lobby, actual innovation happening on every floor. Olivia met me in the executive conference room, ready to build something extraordinary. The contract was 61 pages, but it came down to two things. Vance Autonomous Technologies was selling its complete patent portfolio to Sentinel Aerospace for $750 million, and I was signing on as Chief Technology Officer with a 5-year commitment, full authority over technical direction, and a compensation package worth $2.8 million annually. I signed my name 11 times. Each signature felt like closing a door I had been trying to walk through for years. "Welcome aboard, David," Olivia said. "First order of business, call Julian Hayes. Tell him he starts Monday." The news broke 3 hours later. Apex Defense Systems loses core drone technology in $750 million Sentinel deal. Apex's stock dropped 47% before trading was halted. By market close, they had lost $1.2 billion in valuation. Without Pathguard, Apex was just another defense contractor with aging hardware and no software advantage. Investors realized they had been valuing a company based on technology the chief executive officer had never actually controlled. Nolan Brooks resigned the following morning. The board released a statement about strategic repositioning. But industry insiders knew the truth. The man who had fired me for being an obstacle had just proven exactly how foundational the right expertise really is. Julian called me that night, and for the first time in 2 weeks, he sounded like himself again. "Boss, is it real? Did you actually pull this off?" "It is real, and stop calling me boss. I am your chief technology officer now. Technically, that makes me your boss's boss." He laughed, first time I had heard him laugh since before the termination. 3 weeks later, Julian and 9 other engineers from my old team started at Sentinel. Sarah Jenkins came on as vice president of field operations. Michael Ortiz accepted a senior engineering role with a 20% raise and premium health insurance that covered his daughter from day one. Even my brother Thomas ended up consulting for us on defense integration projects, bringing his 30 years of military intelligence experience to our autonomous systems security architecture. The transition was smoother than anyone predicted. Our new Pathguard 2 platform launched 4 months ahead of schedule. First quarter revenue hit $120 million, mostly from clients who had been burned by Apex's instability and were desperate for a reliable autonomous inspection partner. The Department of Energy contract that Nolan had botched, Sentinel won it, $230 million over 5 years, largest autonomous drone services contract in federal history. By year 2, We were running autonomous inspections for over half the major utility and energy companies in North America. The technology Nolan had dismissed as mature and replaceable became the foundation for the next generation of autonomous infrastructure management. Apex Defense Systems filed for bankruptcy 14 months after I left, sold their remaining assets, mostly office furniture, and a testing facility, to pay creditors. As for the 300 employees Nolan had worried about, most of them found better positions. The good engineers landed at Sentinel, at competitors, at startups building on the autonomous revolution we had helped create. Turns out talented people do not stay unemployed long when an entire industry is growing. Nolan Brooks, last I heard, he was doing management consulting in Phoenix, probably advising other companies on operational efficiency while carefully leaving out the part where he destroyed a billion-dollar company because he could not tell the difference between cutting costs and cutting capabilities. People ask me if I feel guilty about how it played out. Honestly, no. Nolan thought he could replace 27 years of hands-on engineering with budget spreadsheets and jargon. He thought publicly firing me would signal bold, decisive leadership to his board. Instead, it revealed what everyone on my team already knew. He was managing something he had never taken the time to understand. The word I said in that conference room, appreciated, was not sarcasm. It was not bitterness. It was genuine. Because in that moment, watching Nolan's smug face as he read my termination notice like a weather report, I realized he was giving me exactly what I needed. Freedom from fighting people who did not value what I had built. Freedom to take my work somewhere it would be respected. Freedom to build the team and the technology I had always envisioned. Without someone who could not tell a LiDAR sensor from a laser pointer standing in my way, when young engineers ask me for career advice, I tell them 3 things. First, your expertise is not just what you know, it is how you protect what you create. Second, always read the contracts, especially the ones other people skip. And third, never let someone who does not understand your work decide what it is worth, because the day will come when they try to replace you with something cheaper. And if you have been smart, if you have planned ahead, that is the day you discover your real value was always more than their compensation. In the defense industry, we talk about redundancy a lot. Backup systems, fail-safe protocols, contingency plans. Nolan Brooks thought I was the redundancy. Turns out I was the primary system, and he just disconnected it. That lesson cost him his job, his company, and $750 million. But me, I am 55 now, standing in a lab at Sentinel, watching Julian Hayes, who is now our Vice President of Navigation Systems, test the latest generation of Pathguard. Elena and I bought some land in the hill country outside Austin, where I can sit on the porch and think between board meetings. We are set for life, but the money was never really the point. The point is this. I wake up every morning knowing my work matters, knowing my team is valued, and knowing that the people who believed in me are building something extraordinary. That is worth more than any severance package Nolan Brooks could have offered. Appreciated. I meant every letter.